Hello, and welcome to ABC English Story, your channel for learning English through captivating tales. Today, we have a special story from our virtual storyteller, Nguyen. It's a story about dreams, betrayal, and the unexpected paths we take. It reminds us that sometimes the best way to overcome a painful past is to build a brighter future. Pay attention to the characters' emotions and the way they deal with difficult situations. Let's listen to The Phoenix Chef. The aroma of star anise and simmering broth used to be Alara's sanctuary. It was the language of her grandmother, a whisper from the old country, a legacy she carried in her hands. Her dream was a small restaurant, Saigon Seoul, a place where every dish told a story, where the past danced with the present on a plate. Her family, first-generation Vietnamese Americans, nodded with cautious approval, their pride swelling more, however, for her engagement to Mark, a young lawyer from a good family. Mark, they said, was her solid future. The restaurant was a nice, quaint hobby. The wound was inflicted not in a dark alley, but under the bright lights of her own engagement party. Laughter and champagne flutes filled the air, a golden haze over what was supposed to be a golden evening. Then Mark, her Mark, stood up, his smile tight, his eyes avoiding hers. He spoke of different paths, of futures that didn't align. But it was her older brother, David, standing beside him, whose words truly twisted the knife. "Alara is wonderfully creative," David had announced, a placid smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. "But a restaurant, it's a demanding life. Mark needs a partner who can focus on family, on stability." He'd patted Mark's shoulder. "We all just want what's best for her, for them." The them had dissolved in that instant. The whispers that followed were like stones pelting her. Too ambitious. Not ready to be a wife. Chasing a silly dream. Her parents' faces were a mixture of shame and disappointment. The dream of Saigon Seoul wasn't just deferred. It felt like it had been publicly shamed, and her, along with it. The funds her parents had tentatively earmarked for her seed money were silently, quickly, rerouted to David's far more sensible tech startup. That night, the scent of star anise felt like a mockery. Alara wasn't a phoenix born from ashes immediately. First, there was just the char, the bitter taste of betrayal. She was a ghost in her own family home, her ambitions now a source of quiet embarrassment. The city, once vibrant with possibility, felt like a maze of judging eyes. She saw Mark once, across a crowded street. He looked away, a flicker of something, guilt, pity, in his eyes before he was swallowed by the crowd. It was the indifference that stung more than active malice. The fire, when it finally kindled, was slow and deliberate. It wasn't the raging inferno of immediate revenge, but the determined glow of a forge. If her dream was a silly ambition, she would make it a reality so undeniable it would eclipse their doubts. If she was the one deemed unsuitable, she would define her own suitability. She moved out, renting a tiny room above a noisy bakery. The rent was paid by working double shifts, a barista by day, a line cook in a bustling, impersonal kitchen by night. Her hands, once destined for the delicate art of her grandmother's recipes, were now calloused, burned, and perpetually tired. But in the steam and chaos of the professional kitchen, something hardened within her. Hemingway might have said she was forged in that fire. Each perfectly diced onion, each flawlessly seared piece of fish, was a small act of defiance. She saved every penny. Her social life was a notebook filled with recipes, sketches of restaurant layouts and business plans. There was a loneliness to it, a quiet sorrow that Fitzgerald would have understood. The dream so bright, the path so solitary. She saw her family on holidays. The conversations were polite, strained. David would talk about his app, his funding rounds, his successes. Her parents would nod, their pride for him a stark contrast to the careful questions they asked her about her jobs. No one mentioned Saigon Seoul. it was a ghost at their table. Her break came not through a miracle, but through tenacity. A small, run-down diner went up for lease in a forgotten corner of the city. It was all she could afford. She painted the walls herself, a calming teal. She hung up old family photographs, not of the family that doubted, but of her grandmother, her smiling face a silent blessing. She named it the Lantern, a small light in the darkness. The first few months were brutal. She was the chef, the server, the cleaner. Some nights only a handful of customers came. But those who came tasted something unique. They tasted the history in her pho, the innovation in her lemongrass-crusted salmon, the heart in her pandan chiffon cake. It wasn't just food. It was Alara's soul, served on a plate. A local food blogger, one of those forgotten people Nguyen writes about, a struggling writer with a keen palate, wrote a glowing review. He didn't just describe the food, he described the feeling, the sense of place. Slowly, the lantern began to shine. More people came. Whispers turned into buzz. The cramped space was always full. There was a waiting list. She hired staff, young aspiring chefs, often immigrants themselves, who saw in her a kindred spirit. She taught them with patience, the way her grandmother had taught her, but also with the fierce precision she'd learned in the harsh kitchens. One evening, a reservation was made under a name she didn't recognize. But when they walked in, her breath caught. It was her parents and David. They looked around the bustling, vibrant restaurant, at the happy faces of the diners, at Alara, calm and in command in her open kitchen. They were seated at a small table. Alara didn't go out to greet them. She cooked. She sent out their food, each dish a masterpiece, a silent testament. She watched them from the kitchen. Her father, usually so stoic, picked at his shaking beef, his eyes glistening. Her mother kept dabbing her eyes with a napkin, saying it was the spices. David ate slowly, methodically, his gaze fixed on his plate. There was no grand apology, no dramatic confrontation. There was only the clinking of cutlery, the murmur of other diners, and the heavy, unspoken weight of their realization. This was not the act of a woman chasing a silly dream. This was the work of an artist, a businesswoman, a success. As Steinbeck would appreciate, it was the quiet dignity of a common person achieving something extraordinary. Later, as they were leaving, her father paused by the kitchen pass. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a complex emotion, pride, regret, a dawning understanding. He simply said, "The food was very good, Alara. Your grandmother would be proud." He didn't say he was proud, but it was there, in the silence, in the way he held her gaze. It wasn't forgiveness she sought, not anymore. It was acknowledgement. And in its own way, she had it. David avoided her eyes. The ultimate revenge, if one could call it that, came a year later. The Lantern won a prestigious culinary award. There was a gala, a glittering affair. Alara, in a simple, elegant ao dai, a nod to her heritage, accepted the award. As she looked out at the crowd, she saw Mark. He was with a group, looking older, his smile less confident than she remembered. He raised his glass to her, a gesture of, "What? Congratulation? Regret?" She gave a polite, almost imperceptible nod and turned back to her speech, her voice clear and strong. Her success hadn't erased the pain of the past, but it had transformed it. The memory of that engagement party was no longer a source of shame, but a reminder of her own resilience. The wound had become a scar, and scars tell stories. Hers spoke of a quiet determination, a refusal to be defined by others' limitations. The loneliness was still there, sometimes, a faint echo in the late hours after the restaurant closed. But it was now a companion, not a tormentor. She had built her own family within the walls of the Lantern. Was this revenge? Perhaps. But it wasn't the bitter, corrosive kind. It was the revenge of a life well lived, of a dream fiercely pursued and gloriously realized. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had not just proven them wrong, but had proven herself right. As Emerson might observe, she had trusted herself, and in doing so, had found her place in the universe, a place she had built with her own 2 hands. The city lights, once a symbol of her dashed hopes, now twinkled in celebration of her name, her restaurant, her unyielding spirit. And the aroma of star anise and simmering broth was, once again, her sanctuary. And that was The Phoenix Chef by Nguyen. A powerful story, isn't it? Ilara's journey teaches us about resilience, the pain of betrayal, and the strength found in pursuing one's passion. Notice how the story didn't focus on angry confrontation, but on Ilara's internal growth and the quiet triumph of her success. For our English learners, think about the descriptive language used. How did Nguyen show Ilara's feelings rather than just telling us? Consider words like sanctuary, char, kindled, tenacity. How do these words add depth to the story? What did you think of the family's reaction in the restaurant? Sometimes, silence can speak louder than words. This story is a great example of how success can be a profound response to those who doubt or hurt us. It's not about gloating, but about finding your own strength and purpose. Thank you for joining us on ABC English Story. We hope this tale inspires you. Until next time, keep learning, keep dreaming, and keep writing your own story.